Hello and welcome to part 2 of the Nudie Snacks Challenge. This time it's a babka. In part 1 I took some of their crunchy savoury snacks and made a lovely little topping for some tofu, like a nice crunchy coat. In this one, I'm taking their protein balls. I'm going to make a babka. A babka is a traditional Jewish bread, and it's sort of like a brioche dough, and then it has lots of filling and yumminess inside it. So my plan is to chop those down into little pieces, mix it with some flaked almonds, chocolate and toasted oats, and use that to be the filling. I looked online to find a recipe for vegan brioche because typically I think it's made with egg yolks to enrich the dough, and I found a recipe from rainbownourishments.com. I'll pop the link in the description for you. And at the time I planned on doing the babka, and then as I scrolled down into her recipe notes, I saw that she'd used the dough for a babka as well. I think she does a jam roll, like a jammy donut babka. It looks amazing, to be fair. So first up, 415 grams of flour, just plain flour. I'm adding 50 grams of golden caster sugar. You can see that the colour is slightly darker than a regular caster sugar, and that just gives an extra bit of flavour in there. The original recipe was just a plain, it didn't have any spices, so I've decided to add some spicing in there myself. And I'm going to use half a teaspoon of allspice. This has a really lovely warm spiced kind of flavour to it. So half a teaspoon of that, and half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. Maybe I'll do a full teaspoon. Might be too much. We'll find out. Half a teaspoon of salt, and then sieve these together at this stage. I'm going to mix this together to combine everything. I'm going to add the yeast in a bit, but I am going to have to break off because my dad's popping over because it's Easter. And I don't want to have to suddenly stop in the middle of things. And yeast and salt don't mix very well, so I'm going to leave that till last minute. So this is 30 grams of jumbo oats, 30 grams of flaked almonds. I've got a 100 gram bar of dark chocolate. I'm just going to smash it to pieces and then chop it even finer. So just hit it on something hard. I'll introduce you to Nudie Snacks, makers of delicious little treats like cauliflower crisps, lentil curls, coconut chips, and some amazing protein balls like I'm using here. They're a Scottish-based company and they use locally sourced products wherever they can. Head over to nudiesnacks.co.uk and use code NUDIE10 to get 10% off your first order. Dad's been and gone. He dropped off an Easter egg for me, which is very sweet of him. So get back on with the baking. So what I'm going to do is toast off the nuts and oats. Put them on at 200 degrees C, and I've set the timer for 7 minutes so I don't forget. Learning, you see. I'm going to add a tablespoon of yeast now. I had to run out and buy more earlier because mine was dead. So it's a good job I checked. Normally I just chuck it in. A way to check if your yeast is still active: if you warm up a little bit of milk, not too hot though, it needs to be less than 50 degrees C. Add a bit of sugar, sprinkle the yeast on, and if anything happens, then it's okay. If it doesn't, it's dead, I'm afraid. Chuck it away. Or use it just for flavour. You won't get any rise from it. And do 1 tablespoon, which is 1 sachet, just under actually, but hopefully it won't be too bad. Sprinkle that. And I'm going to mix that through a little bit. And make a little well in the centre. I'm going to start pouring my liquid ingredients into that well. 165 grams or mils, either one is fine, of soya milk. 115 grams of melted vegan butter. Good log of vanilla, and give these a mix together. Now all flours react differently, so it could be that you're going to be a little bit drier than this or a bit wetter, so just add a bit more soy milk or a bit more flour until you get the dough that you're after. Now kneading is going to help the gluten develop, so the bit that gives it the stretch and the rise. And this needs to be kneaded for about 5 minutes. Nuts went a bit dark, but that's okay. Here's the toast on the nuts and oats. The nuts probably went a little bit darker than I wanted, but it'll be fine because they're going to be inside the bread, so they're not going to get any darker with the bake. I'll put them there to cool while I carry on working the dough. So I've been kneading the dough for about 5-6 minutes. You might poke it springs back a little bit. And I've got a slight window pane, so when I pull it, it's translucent. Don't know if that'll show wonderfully well on the camera. Shape it into a little round, put it back in the bowl, covering the bowl with a damp tea towel, so I just ran it under the tap and wrung it out. And I'm going to find somewhere warm to put the bowl. It needs to prove, which means the yeast is going to activate and give it some rise. So it should be kind of half again as big. To go with the babka, I've decided to make a sort of luxurious type of fruit butter, and I'm going to make plum and port. I'm going to cheat. Instead of using fresh plums, I'm going to use prunes and port, obviously. And my thinking for this is that when you do an apple butter or whatever fruit butter, you just have to keep baking it down to remove the moisture. So I'm thinking prunes, you're kind of halfway there really. It's the same as I did the apricot butter and spiced cherry butter. So I just chop it into sections. And you want the cores, pips, everything, because that's where all the pectin is. Same with the pears. You can use all apples for this, but apples have a flavour, whereas pears are a bit milder. So that's why I'm using the pears as well. 500 gram bag of prunes, and they're pitted. Do be mindful of that. Sometimes they've got the stones in there. I'll do 50 mils of port to start with and see how much liquid that gives. Add the cut fruit on top, the apples and pears, and I'll put this in at 170 for about half an hour or so, just until the apples are soft. And in the meantime, I'll chop up the protein balls. So we have chocky orange and peanut butter, salted caramel brownie, and carrot cake into 3, I think. And then into 3 again. I'm just going to rough chop through these just to make sure there's no big bits. So that's the size I'm going for. So we've got some finer bits and then some nice big chunks to chew on. I'm just going to mix up the filling together now, and then it's ready to sprinkle on. I'm going to chop the almonds through a little bit just to make them slightly smaller. I do want to keep a bit of bite in there, and it's, nice bigger flakes, but I just don't want whole ones like that. This is the 30 grams of toasted jumbo oats, 30 grams of flaked almonds. Then I've got 3 packets which weigh 32 grams each of the protein balls. Mix those in. And then the 100 gram bar of chocolate. Get it all nicely combined. You can have a look at the fruit. That's had about half an hour. So that's getting good and soft. I'll put it back in the oven, but I'm going to cover it just so it softens a bit more. I've also decided I want some chia seeds in the mix. 3 tablespoons of chia seeds, just to give an extra bit of healthfulness. It's got lots of nice nutrients in there, but also a nice bit of crunch. Yeah, I think we're good. I'm going to scoop this into the blender. I'm adding 50 mils of juice, so it's a few, like 3 tablespoons of juice, just to help blend it, because I think it might be a bit too thick. Let's see. And you don't want loads of liquid in there, because then you just have to take it back out again to make the butter. It's lovely and glossy and gloopy. I need to sieve it now to get rid of all the bits of pip and stem, that kind of thing. The idea's just popped in my head of using Szechuan pepper in the butter. I can't justify that, I don't know why, but I thought just, oh, that might be nice. I'm going to crush up a little bit and sprinkle it on and see what the flavour's like this. See what it's like. Oh my god, that's amazing. So I'm going to sieve this now, and then I'll add the spices in. So I've got just less than half a teaspoon here. So sprinkle that in. And then I'm going to finally grate in some licorice root. And again, this just gives a really nice spiced, round, delicious, rich flavour. Mix this together really well. So you can see the texture of it at the moment. It's just gorgeous. Very stretchy, very glossy, and check the flavour. The port is there, but the flavour is very subtle. So maybe I should have put in another 50 mils of port instead of the juice when I blended it. Yeah, nonetheless, that is fantastic. And the pepper just gives it a dimension I hadn't thought of. Back into the roasting dish, and you do want it to be non-stick if you can, just to make it clean up a bit easier. And then get this nice and flat in there. Put this in the oven. I'm just going to check on the dough. It hasn't really risen much. I'm going to microwave a cup of water for a couple of minutes and get the inside of the microwave nice and steamy, and then put the bowl in there. Maybe that'll help kickstart the yeast activation. That's the only thing I can think of at the moment. Of course something went wrong. And then we'll pick it back up in 20 minutes or so when I get the fruit out. Look how rich and silky that is. Yum, yum, yum. So just stir it all back together, and the skin that forms on top, that'll just melt away. Have a look at this. It's really hard to tell how much it's growing. Put it back in the microwave, I guess. I didn't think this would be the thing to go wrong. I'm going to steam the microwave again, put it back in, see how it is in 20 minutes. The fruit's had another, it's had probably another half an hour. So glossy and delicious looking. If you want a super fine finish, feel free to sieve that again if you want to. I don't. I'm going to check the dough. It sounds like it's got air in it. So I think I'm going to roll it out at this stage. I'm going to give it a bit of a knead to knock some of the air out. No idea what's wrong with this. Maybe the brand new yeast was dead. I'm just putting a bit of flour onto my mat here, and the reason it's on this is because I'm going to cut into it, and I don't want to cut the worktop. Bit of flour on the rolling pin. I'm going to roll this into sort of a rough rectangle shape. I'm going to grease the inside of this tin before I forget to do it. So just a bit of oil on a paper towel. And the rectangle wants to be kind of half again as long as the tin, which this actually is. Time to sprinkle on the mixture. So just take handfuls of it. I have way more than I needed, so, which is fine because that can just go on top of my yogurt in the morning. I'm going to use the rolling pin just to get this hopefully embedded in the dough a bit more. Now comes the bit I've never done before. I've never made any kind of rolled pastry. And then I need to cut it in half down the middle. Moment of truth. So straight down the middle. What needs to happen is to kind of braid it together. But it's just falling out everywhere. So I might just have to wing it. That's how I go. So if I squidge that together, so I'm just going to have to try and lift the pieces over each other. Good grief. It looks like something's been murdered. And I need to put it into the tin. So what I'm going to do is kind of compress it on itself, like that bit. I don't know how to do this. Yay! And this now needs a second proof. So I'll put it back in the microwave, do the steamy microwave trick again. And we'll see, hopefully it's going to rise a little bit and sort of fluff up from there. If not, it's just going to be a very tough loaf. So I'll see you back in about 45 minutes or so. The bag has had its second proving, so I'm going to open the microwave, see what's in there. Yeah, I'm not sure that that's at all swollen. I'm just going to chuck it in the oven, see what happens. It's going in the oven for 30 to 40 minutes and I preheated it at 170. Now the original recipe said 180, but to turn it down if it gets too brown on the outside, and just knowing what this oven's like, I'm going to take a bit of a measured approach and do it at 170. It's a bit cooler. And just keep an eye on it. babka's had about 40 minutes. Let's have a little look. Well, it's definitely grown. I'm going to use a meat probe to check the temperature inside. It needs to be about 185 Fahrenheit. I think it needs a bit longer. Yeah, I can see that bit, although that could be protein bar. Yeah, I'm going to give it another 10. Just put some foil over the top because I don't want it to go much darker. I'm going to turn this out, hopefully, onto a cooling mat. I have to say, I'm quite happy with that. So I'm going to brush maple syrup all over the top of it to give it some shine. Just make sure to get it in all the nooks and crannies. Yumminess. I'll leave this to cool down a little bit, maybe half an hour, something like that, and then carve it up and shove it all in my mouth. It's finally time. I'm gonna leave a bit of a crust. Could have probably done with a bit longer. It's a tiny bit doughy inside. It has got quite a tight structure, so it's a little bit doughy. So I think it's a little bit underbaked, but also there's just not much lift from the yeast, so it just needed a bit more proving. So perhaps that's one to save for a warmer day. Smear on some of the cream cheese and a bit of the butter. It's incredibly thick. Dive in. It's a much bigger bite than I intended. But it was delicious. So it's more like a bread than it is a cake. So it has got some body to it, but I really enjoy that. The filling there is really tasty. Sweet, but not sugary. You know, it's not too cloying or sickly or anything. And the flavours all work really well together. You can easily adapt the recipe as well. So you can put all kinds of different nuts, fruits in there even, some raisins and dried apricots. Change different flours, use different fats. Highly adaptable and very delicious. So if you've enjoyed watching the concoctions of my curious brain, hit subscribe, tap the bell icon, and you'll never miss an episode.